G'day guys, timer is on. Happy running. Enjoy your run out there for me today because I cannot run, unfortunately. If you're on the STEPN Injury Prevention Facebook group, you'd have seen last night that I posted that I had a pretty bad fall. I was running down to my run club, ironically, and saw an old man on the sidewalk with on the footpath with this walking frame, and I didn't want to freak him out by running too close to him, so I took the route down the driveway kind of last minute, and I was wearing the wrong type of shoes, which is why I'm going to be talking about shoe selection today. And yeah, slipped in this horrible Sydney weather has just continued to give us rain. So I slipped in the wet, got my knee caught under me and my ankle in a really awkward angle. Felt a big pop, which is never a good sign, and haven't been able to really walk since. Had to hobble home, which is a pretty tough time. And then I've had to cancel my clients and stay at home because I can barely move. So, bit of a drag. Trying to find the positives in it. Always, I always say with injuries, you want to try and see them as opportunities, and opportunities to focus on ideally something still active that you can do that maybe you don't do as much of. So I'm going to be looking to get stuck into plenty of upper body strengthening, which I've really neglected since doing all my marathon training. Is a real bummer because I just was organising an 18-week program with a Australian Olympian runner who I work who refers clients to me, and I was really excited about getting started on that today, and then sure enough hurt myself last night. Classic. But yes, I do think when you do have a bad injury, thinking about injuries and opportunities to work on something physical that you otherwise would probably neglect. So for me it's going to be some upper body and core strengthening sort of work, which will then also hopefully keep my exercise habit going, because I think that's one of the hardest things when you do get a significant injury, when you can't do what you normally do, is you just lose your exercise habit, which then is hard to get started again if you're off for quite a while, and that can also then lead to not being quite as tired, so you don't get quite as good sleep, and then not eating quite as well because you're not kind of as health focused at the time. So definitely trying to keep the exercise habit by doing upper body strength and core work, and then also doing the bare minimum of lower body strength to try and maintain some muscle mass, as I'll probably be off for at least I'm going to kind of have a close look at it tomorrow, but probably around 6 weeks at least, which is a real drag. But then also trying to see injury as an opportunity to focus on some other parts of your life that training often takes a lot of time from. So for me, it's going to be doubling down on getting my business rolling. So there's a bit about me. Trying to figure out what I'm doing with the STEPN app, whether it's hard to watch those the energy counter, just not being able to use it and not earning that sweet GST, but that's okay. I'm trying to decide what to do about that, thinking I'll try and sell the runners I've got. So if anyone is interested in level 9 and level 6 0 mint runners, hit me up. Be really appreciated, so I can hopefully get some walkers and once I can walk and get back into it. But for today, I was thinking of talking about footwear, because the footwear selection was probably what did me in. There's a great sort of term when it comes to troubleshooting problems called the Swiss cheese model of when you get an injury, it's often when problems arise, it's often a series of circumstances that all happen to line up, and you kind of go through the whole of those Swiss cheese all lining up together, and that's when you get injured. And so for me, it was that choosing to wear these trail running shoes, which had a kind of plasticky cleats on them on the bottom instead of a kind of more grippy rubber. And then that combined with the wet surface on the driveway that I was running down, combined with there happened to be this old man on a four-wheeled walker looking very unstable, walking in the dark and in the rain. Those three circumstances just lined up perfectly to lead to me nailing myself. So real bummer, but what can you do? So I guess that's when you're looking at injury prevention, sort of thinking about that Swiss cheese model of like, it's probably not going to be one decision here or there, but it's just when a series of circumstances line up and then put you in a position where you could run into issues. So hopefully with all the different factors that I've been talking about on the previous, episode 23, so previous 22 episodes, you can start to see how when applying that, that idea of like the Swiss cheese model is like, is your programming right? Is your running technique decent? Are you incorporating strength training? How's your recovery? Shoe selection, surface selection, all of those factors you can kind of think about as being like contributing factors to injury, because injury is really hard to predict. But the more of those that you can be getting right, then the less likely you are to run into injury. But yeah, it is very hard to predict injury, and the biggest predictor of injury actually is previous injury. So if you do have something that you've had issues with before, then doing everything you can to strengthen up that previously injured area is the best way to go about it. So I did plan on talking about shoes today, but I think maybe that's probably best for a different day, and I'll continue on this sort of maybe even talking about acute injury and what happens when you do something like I have done today, because the recommendations sort of have changed over the years about there was the ICE protocol, so ICE, compress, elevate, then it was RICE, which is rest, ICE, compress, elevate, then it was RICER, and then it was police, and now the current thinking around acute injury management is the one that I kind of ascribe to is the Peace and Love acronym, which comes from the British Journal of Sports Medicine, a bit more of a handful than RICE. A few more things to think about. In fact, I'm just going to bring it up here so I make sure I haven't forgotten anything. But the idea is that when you are in this kind of acute phase of injury, like you want to know what the best way to things you can do in the early stages to have good long-term results. And I think it's really interesting to see how it has changed compared to the sort of the old school ICE, compress and elevate. So I'll just run through these factors. So the first one's I want to point out the thing that is not there. And so icing is no longer recommended, and they actually say in PEACE, so the A of PEACE is avoid anti-inflammatories, which I think is the big one that's really quite interesting and probably quite challenging for a lot of people who've always done this. And the idea is that you actually want to be promoting tissue healing and anti-inflammatory medications, and generally reducing inflammation is like you're trying to turn down the factors that are like inflammation is there to try and cause healing. So I'll just run through all of them, and then we'll dive a bit deeper into that. So it's protection. So it's avoiding activities and movements that increase pain during the first few days after injury. So this is, again, talking about acute injuries, which you can see is different from like a tendinopathy, where having some pain during your exercise is probably like necessary to adequately load it. So this is acute injuries. Elevation. So that's a way of like managing inflammation a little bit, like reducing swelling a little bit without having to kind of take the anti-inflammatory path. And then avoid anti-inflammatories is the A of PEACE, and so that's medications and icing. And compression is, again, to reduce the swelling. So notice that like swelling and inflammation different. You can still have like that helpful inflammatory process with just a bit less swelling. The swelling's there to really try and lock down your joint so you don't do the things that are aggravating it, and that's already kind of covered in the P of Peace and Love. And then education. So it's basically like learning what you've got, what's the likelihood outcomes, what you should do and avoid, and trying to promote moving away from like the idea of passive treatments and medical investigations being always the first line, because I think a lot of people, just like, and for me, like last night, I was like, oh gosh, like I wish I could, see someone who could just fix this immediately, because the reality of 6 weeks is really disappointing. And there's the timer. And you just want to get someone to fix it and make it all better immediately, but unfortunately it just doesn't happen like that. And nature needs to play its role, as it actually says here in the article. So that's the kind of first 24 hours of the acute injury is the piece, and then love is kind of looking at like the 72 hours and beyond, so the 3 days and beyond. And so the love is load, optimism, vascularization, and exercise. And so the loading is basically like trying to gradually return to normal activities, and you're sort of using like that irritability pain that I've talked about in previous episodes, so I won't go over again. If you haven't listened to that episode, go back and listen to it. Using that kind of irritability as that guideline of what's appropriate pain and therefore what is your appropriate level of loading. And then the O for love is optimism, which might seem like a bit woo-woo, but as I kind of talked about before with that idea of, the trying to keep momentum with your exercise, like injuries can really cause these like downward spirals, and it's really important to try and keep that like positive, or like put the brakes on the downward spiral and try and maintain the upward spiral of the healthy behaviors that exercise generally does promote. Because like when you do start to slip down that slope of not sleeping well and not eating well, then everything just gets compounded, and it can be much harder to get back to your previous level. So staying optimistic about things and trying to take that, growth mindset of how you can make the most of the unfortunate situation. And then so V is vascularization. So basically trying to get pain-free cardiovascular exercise in there. So for me, it might be, I don't know, hopefully cycling will be possible soon on a stationary bike, but both the knee and the ankle, I can't imagine doing that yet. But it might be something like upper body cardio, like getting in the pool, probably using a pool boy to facilitate the swimming, and or like a ski erg, which is a thing we have in the gym that I work at. And then exercise. So basically trying to build up like a progressive targeted loading, so strengthening up the appropriate areas for that injury. So that's peace and love. So again, peace was protection, elevation, avoid anti-inflammatories, compression, education. That's the first 24 hours. And then the love is load, optimism, vascularization, and exercise. So that's the sort of 3 days, and then a guideline for the future. So hopefully that's interesting for people. And I know it wasn't quite what I originally planned, but that's why I'm just doing these episodes off the cuff. So, but yeah, I do think it is a useful one, because for people getting out there and exercising, there are so many people training. These acute injuries are likely, and so knowing what to do about them is important. And hopefully, I think if anything, like just taking away that that idea of like downward spirals and positive spirals, and how you can change your focus a little bit, stay engaged in your exercise, even if something does go wrong, is really important. Because I know a lot of people who are getting into their exercise because of STEPN and Move to Earn. Basically, like you've got this incentivization there in the form of like financial reward, and I think that's a great way of getting people into doing something. But like I really do hope that no matter what happens with the platform, and that this promotes like a long-standing healthy approach to exercise long term, and as soon as the reward's gone, I hope that there isn't this kind of reflexive dismissal of it because you're not getting that financial reward. So I really hope that people do kind of take on that idea of like the positive health spiral and make the most of it, and do know that if you do get injured, that there's always something you can be doing, something positive you can be working on. Like it's often those kind of chances to work on something that you're not good at, where you get the most or you haven't focused on for a while, that you get the quickest improvements, quickest rewards. Like I learned to swim when I really busted my ankle, and that's been wonderful. I end up moving to where I live now, like to the suburb I live now, because the ocean swimming is amazing. Meeting my fiance, now having a baby. So like I wouldn't have done any of that if I hadn't hurt my ankle really badly and mountain biking and then picked up swimming. So like you just got to try and think about those like positive things that you can be doing even if you are in a shit situation. So sorry about the swearing. Hopefully that has been helpful. And yeah, I'll jump into the shoe conversation and why I shouldn't have been wearing trail shoes on the concrete yesterday. See you tomorrow.